I've got to be honest with you. I told almost no one I had breast cancer. I couldn't say the words, I have breast cancer without ugly crying. I just couldn't do it. Up until that moment, here is my entire medical history. I had my tonsils out at 16, and I gave birth to 2 children in the 80s without so much as an aspirin. Nothing, because that's how they told us we were supposed to do it as women. But that was it. I was a really healthy person, and this just hit me so hard. I just couldn't talk about it. I just couldn't for a long time. And I have to laugh. One of my friends said to me, leave it to you, Susan, to tell no one you had breast cancer and then write a book about it and let the world know you had it.
Hi everyone, I'm Samira Daswani, the founder and CEO of Caregivers. Today, we're going to hear from an author and a motivational speaker who got diagnosed with breast cancer in 2021. She's going to talk about how she went through surgery, how she advocated for herself, and ended up writing a book called I Hate the Color Pink. You're going to really enjoy this one. She has some really fun little life tidbits in there. Enjoy. I have a very cool author and motivational speaker with us today. Her title of the book she wrote is I Hate the Color Pink, which, for a variety of reasons, gets me very excited. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Susan, we have to start with the book title. Tell us about that.
That title came to me when the book was just beginning because I hate those little pink ribbons that remind me of my breast cancer. And as my editor said to me, it's a very catchy title for a book. People don't forget it. So it's kind of nice when they meet you and they go away and they can find it somewhere and buy it. So it sticks with them. So that's why I wear pink sometimes to when I go to speak to people and they're always like, we thought you hated pink. I said, no, I mostly hate those pink ribbons that remind me of my breast cancer. So that's where it started.
So let me maybe ask you a question here. So there's the color pink, there's the pink ribbon, and then there's ribbon itself. And does all of it remind you of cancer? Is there like a stack ranking?
No, it's the pink ribbon. It's October when you and I are talking. So, that's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And you're inundated with all the things that are pink. And, so many people tie onto it with selling you stuff and all this kind of stuff. But mainly, I just thought it was a short, catchy title for a book, I think. And that's where it all started. And that's where it's gone.
Okay, tell us about your diagnosis.
I was a very faithful mammogram lady. I had my mammograms even during COVID every November. And November of 2021, I went in for my normal mammogram. And we all know how that goes. It's 15 minutes of uncomfortableness. 2 weeks later, you get a letter in the mail that says, all clear, you throw it in the trash, and you go on with your life. Well, I got a phone call 2 days later. And they said to me, we want you back. We want you back for another mammogram, a biopsy, and an ultrasound. And my alarm bells went off. And I have to tell you, that biopsy was one of the most painful things I've ever had in my life. I left there with a metal clip in my breast, an ice pack in my bra, and I was crying so hard I had no business driving that car.
Susan, can you maybe tell us where you live?
I live in Southern California, Orange County. Smidgen of background with me. I am married to my high school sweetheart for 50 years.
Whoa.
Yes. And as I tell people all the time, he's the nicest man I've ever met in my life and the most annoying man I've ever met in my life. So I think that just comes with decades of knowing each other. That's one thing that was pretty tough through this process because men are linear. Men like to give you solutions. Men want to give you answers. And my husband didn't have an answer for this. And we women, we like to dissect stuff. We like to talk about it. We like to talk about it some more. We like to cry over it. We like to talk about it with a glass of wine. And that's why I tell people, find your tribe. Find those women that lift you up, that care about you, that your success is their success. Finding your tribe, especially during a health crisis like this, was highly important for me.
Susan, before we go too far down that route, you said something. The reason I wanted you to tell me where you live is you said I had no business driving that car back.
Yes.
So you've been married for such a long time.
I wouldn't let him come with me. I said no.
Why?
He wanted to. I wasn't ready yet.
Wasn't ready for which part of it?
I wasn't ready for it to be real. I already knew it was. You know how we know things in our heart that our head doesn't want to know? It was one of those. I just had to go by myself. And, that's just how I chose to do it. And he wasn't happy with me about it, but he also lets me do things the way I need to do them.
When did you end up, did you ever include him in the process?
Oh, absolutely. He went with me to the appointment with the surgeon, which is very interesting. I always say to people, picture one of your gynecological appointments with your husband sitting in the chair across the room, because that's kind of how it was. But he's a good guy, and he tagged along, and he heard, because it's also, I think, important for not just you to hear the things going on, but for someone other ears to hear it also, because my ears are filled with trauma and drama because I'm scared and worried, and theirs are a little more removed. So I think that helps.
Okay. What was his reaction in the appointment?
Oh, funny reaction. The surgeon came in. May I tell you about that?
Of course.
She came in, and it's how I got her is an important part of this story. After that additional mammogram and biopsy, 2 days later, which happened to be the day before Thanksgiving, I got a call from a lovely young woman, Hannah, who told me I had invasive ductal carcinoma. She said, I have an appointment with you with a surgeon next month at such and such a time. And I said, is the doctor a man or a woman? And she said, well, it's a man, but if you'd like a female, I have one the same day available, and I can give you an appointment with her. And I said, Hannah, if this were happening to you, if this were happening to your body, which one of those 2 doctors would you choose? Dead silence on the phone. I'm pretty sure they're not supposed to recommend one doctor over another, but I just waited. And she finally said to me, Susan, I would pick Dr. Ranluby because she is an amazing woman, an amazing surgeon. She will know your file inside and out before she walks in that room, and she is a wonderful choice. And that was the first time that something like that changed the course for me. And I had a wonderful surgeon as a result. And that's how I found her, was by asking questions. She informed me that my breast cancer was very close to the front of my breast and that she'd be removing my nipple. And I just stopped, and tears streaming down my face. I said, I'm sorry, I don't understand. And she said, well, if I don't do it like that, Susan, you're going to end up with what we call dog ear. It's a very misshapen breast. It'll have 2 points. You won't like it if I leave your nipple. If you trust me to do my job and do it the way I know is right, I will leave you with a rounded breast. So as you asked how it was with my husband in there, he was listening to all this, and she went out to get the EKG machine to make sure my heart was good for surgery. And my husband looked at me and he said, this is all great news. And I said, what did you just hear that I didn't hear? What is great news about that? And I said, you know what? We're going to cut off an inch of your penis. It's still going to work. Don't worry. But you don't mind, do you? And he's sitting there squirming in his chair like any man would. And he goes, well, I meant we're on the good end of a bad situation. So that's where men see things that women don't. And it's a perfect example. So he backstepped a little bit because he knew I was really upset. So, yeah, that was a hard day.
I appreciate you sharing the dynamic with your husband, because I think it's a part of the narrative that we don't hear all the time. And it's a very real part of it, right? It's this thing that happens in these rooms, and we hear the doctor-patient side. We don't hear the spouse side.
Yeah, you know what? I've got to be honest with you. I told almost no one I had breast cancer. I couldn't say the words, I have breast cancer, without ugly crying. I just couldn't do it. And so my circle of friends was tiny, because I just, up until that moment in my life, here is my entire medical history. I had my tonsils out at 16, and I gave birth to 2 children in the 80s without so much as an aspirin. Nothing, because that's how they told us we were supposed to do it as women. Then I watched my daughter get those epidurals later on for my grandkids and thought, what a fool I was to go through that with nothing. But that was it. I was a really healthy person. And this just hit me so hard. And I just couldn't talk about it. I just couldn't for a long time. And I have to laugh. One of my friends said to me, leave it to you, Susan, to tell no one you had breast cancer and then write a book about it and let the world know you had it. Here we are.
One of the ways you stayed really healthy before all of this was running.
I can't tell you why, but at 56 years old, I took up running. I held straight A's in high school for 4 years. I was that kid, but I had a C in PE every time. If you figured it out and you didn't cause trouble, you got the C. That was me, and I was not athletic at all. But I got it in my head that I wanted to run a 5K, and I did, and I hated it, but I loved how I felt afterwards. And after a few months of that, I thought, I wonder if I could run a half marathon, which is 13.1 miles. And I started training, and I trained for 8 months, and I ran one, and it was misery, and I was slow. But when I finished, I felt euphoric. I felt wonderful. Then I got it in my head down the road to say, I wonder if I could run 65 half marathons by the time I turned 65, which I did. I ran my last one. My 65th marathon was in my own hometown right here in Tustin, the Dino Dash it's called. And I have all the medals to prove it. I was slow as snails, but I finished. And that's a really important message I would like to impart to people today. There's 2 things you can control with health stuff or hard things in your life. And I think it's attitude and exercise. And you can choose positive or you can choose negative. And that exercise, even while I was doing it, sometimes I hated it. But like I said, I sure felt good when I got done. And being out, and you don't have to run a half marathon, just get outside, walk in your neighborhood, hear the birds. It just changes everything for you. And I truly believe that exercise and attitude is such a big part of health.
Did you run through treatment?
I remember my surgeon saying to me that she was going to put such blockers, I would feel no pain for 3 solid days. And I did it, not a bit. And she said to me, I know you're going to think you want to run tomorrow after surgery. You may not. I said, okay, how long? She said 30 days. So I waited the 30 days and I did take up the running again because I knew how it made me feel at the end. And I felt so out of control and so many of these things happening to me, I could control the exercise.
Susan, I'm going to ask you a private question. Tell me if it's TMI and we don't have to go there. All right. So you have surgery.
Yes.
It affects your breasts.
Yes.
30 days later, you start running.
Yes.
After your breasts have had surgery.
You're asking me, 30 days after, I bound them up and tight and took off trotting.
Okay, here's my question for you. Here's where the TMI part comes.
Okay.
Didn't your breast hurt? My breast hurt when I run in general, let alone...
Well, yes, you really have to invest in good bras, also because I don't have small breasts, But yeah, I watch some of these gals when they're passing me the other way and I see them bouncing away and I think, doesn't that hurt? Because I really had really tight bras that really helped a lot. It's first investing. They're expensive and they're worth it.
So pre-surgery, you've invested in these tight bras. Post-surgery, same bra, different bra, you go bra shopping.
Yeah, because I was lucky enough to have a lumpectomy. And I always tell people, don't say I just had a lumpectomy. It's still trauma. It's still hard. Don't diminish that. It's okay. They got good margins. And I always talk about that it was January of 2022, my surgery, and we were deep in a COVID winter. And my husband wasn't even allowed to walk into that hospital with me. I went alone. And that was a very hard hard walk into that hospital. And it was hard for him to be sitting in that car looking back at me too. I'm sure, it's when you've been with someone as long as he and I've been together, you know, I always say when you get married, we were 21 years old when we got married, we were children. And I always say two things can happen. You either grow up together or you grow apart. And we grew up together. We have history that goes on for a long time. But yeah, I didn't have it in the lymph nodes. They were clear, so that was a blessing. So that's a good thing. She did explain to me something that I really talk a lot about with people when I share my story with others about in the olden days, they used to take 12, 14 lymph nodes from your arms. It inevitably for so many women created the lymphedema, which is the swelling of the arm. It's painful and it never goes away. And she said, we have discovered through progress in science that we could take 2 or 3 lymph nodes and get the same accurate reading without all that worry and pain for the woman. And so I have not experienced that. But again, when I go out and talk to people, there's always a woman in that crowd from long ago who is still suffering with that lymphedema because of so many lymph nodes being removed.
Susan, when did you know you wanted to write a book?
Well, this was interesting. I had a friend that I did tell, and she said to me, go get one of those black and white composition books. They still sell them at Walmart, and they're still 50 cents. And she said, write down everything. Write every question you have. Write everything. Go into every single doctor's appointment with that book. Because you get in there, and you're nervous, and you're scared, and the time goes by fast. You get in the car and think, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask this and this. So I faithfully took that book and I did have everything in it. I am the grandmother of 3 amazing children that are now 18, 19, and our oldest granddaughter will be 21 on this Sunday, as a matter of fact. Well, teenagers are famous for very late night texts. I am an early riser. I'm a 4:30 to 5 a.m. person, and I'm gassed by 8:30 at night. So many a morning I would wake up to a text from one of these beautiful young people, and they would say things like, Grammy, I know this is really hard right now, and I know it's scary, but you're one of the strongest people I know, and we all love you, and we're going to get through it. And for whatever reason, I printed those texts, cut them out, and slapped them in that notebook. And then I found other emotional phrases that spoke to me, whatever. And what I realized is I organically had the outline for a book.
Oh, look at that.
So I ran with that, and I kept writing for that entire year that I had 38 doctor's appointments. And I hired an editor, and I said, help me polish it up. She said, I love your voice, so I don't want to change your voice. I said, yeah, but I'm not really good with semicolons, so I need your help with that. She goes, oh, don't worry, we can fix those. So it was a year-long adventure that I was experiencing and writing about at the same time. And I'll tell you, writing this book kept me from the depths of despair more than once during that year.
How so?
Because I could put it to paper. I could put it to, computer, I guess you can say. But I could write about it. I could say how angry I was or how scared I was or how mad I was or how happy I felt today. And I just think that I've always been a writer. I've always had like a blog. And my friends used to constantly say to me, why aren't you writing a book? And I said, I just write short, pithy things. I don't have a big enough story. And then God tapped me on the shoulder and said, hey, kid, I got a story for you. So here we are.
All right, we're going to go into a rapid fire section. You ready for me?
I'm ready for you.
All right. Okay. Besides your own book, what is one resource that you would recommend to someone who is newly diagnosed?
I say do your homework. I don't mean just WebMD. After everything, and I was lucky enough to dodge chemo because my oncotype score was low, and I didn't need that. But my oncologist wanted me to take a pill that I was very unsure about for 5 years. And so I reached out to people. I said, do you have friends who've had breast cancer? Have they taken this? Would they talk to me? Would they share with me? I became, a speaker to anybody I that would share their story with me. And I kind of liken breast cancer to having a baby. Everybody's story is a little bit different, and yet we have some similarities. And that people were my big research. They really were. And I was such an active person. I got excellent care throughout everything. And I think it's because I demanded it. And I just feel like be your own best health advocate. Ask questions. Ask more questions. If you have a doctor who acts like you're asking too many questions, get a new doctor. Get another opinion. And I did. And I feel like because I was so active in my own care, it never missed a beat. It was always great. That was a long answer to a rapid fire question. I'm sorry.
Well, before I get in, you ready? You ready for me? Okay. Best piece of advice you got in the first 3 months?
In the past 3 months.
First 3 months.
First 3 months. Take each day as it comes.
What does self-advocacy mean to you?
Self-advocacy is everything to me. Self-advocacy, again, means being your own best health advocate, being an active part of it. The days of us nodding our heads and going, oh, okay, whatever you say, that's behind us. We need to take part in our medical anything. I don't care what it is. It doesn't have to be cancer. Be involved. It changes everything.
One piece of advice you would give to your husband?
Continue with the patience level you have for me.
All right. Fill in the blanks for me. Being the patient from hell means?
I don't know that I was the patient from hell. I was crabby some of the time. I was very crabby at the beginning of my radiation. I didn't want to be there. And these young technicians, they're young to me. I'm not young. And they were so kind and they were so caring. And let's face it, you're seeing somebody new every 12 or 14 minutes. How can you still be that kind to each one of those people? It was phenomenal to me.
One word that sums up what the cancer experience has taught you.
Letting go.
Susan, this has been so much fun for me. Thank you for being on the show. I'm going to ask you one last question, which is, where can someone find your book?
My book is on Amazon. It's called I Hate the Color Pink. I would love you to read it. I love to hear what people think after they read it. I've had so many people share so many just deeply personal stories that they needed to tell somebody, and I just happened to be the person they told. And I feel so lucky and blessed to be able to share this story and bring comfort to other people. I always say the book is just the conduit of I'm supposed to be hearing these stories, sharing my story, and the book's a byproduct to that. But I hate the color pink.
Thank you so much, Susan. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're healthy, and I'm so glad that you joined the community in the way you have and the impact you're contributing to the space.
Thank you so much. It's been delightful.
This podcast, show notes, and newsletter is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of information on this podcast or any materials linked from this blog is at the user's own risk. The opinions of the speakers are their own and do not represent the opinions of organizations they're affiliated with, nor do they reflect the opinions of MantaCares Inc. or MantaCares' sponsors.